There wasn't a lot of updates today with the Activision Blizzard case, but there are some important dates that Itis went over, and he answered a whole bunch of questions about how this whole thing could turn out at the end of the day. Let's go over them right now. So first things first, you can see that early February is going to be the next time we get any sort of news. That's from February 8th to 10th. Provisional findings and remedies if required by the CMA. So sometime this week that is likely going to happen. And then nothing until April, really. That's when the final decision from the European Commission is going to come through. April 12th would be a motion for a preliminary injunction on the gamers lawsuit. And then April 18th would be the second extension of the original outside date. If Microsoft quits by that date, they have to pay a termination fee of $2.5 billion, I think is the amount of zeros though. If they don't, the outside date gets extended to July 18th. Final report on remedies from the CMA, decision from New Zealand, decision from China, and everything's sort of waiting on whatever's going to happen with the CMA and EU right now. July 18th is the final extension date where they have to pay $3 billion. And then the FTC in-house trial begins way out in August, so this thing could drag on for quite a long time. And then the decision from the FTC administrative law judge in early 2024. That's if the FTC does decide to take it to trial, and it could go longer than that. So he's setting expectations for what you can expect this week. Basically, the provisional findings from the CMA. It's a document that essentially works like a draft decision. It must be followed by the final report. The provisional findings will be published in non-confidential form on the CMA website. Expect at least 60 to 80 pages, although I think that this case is more likely to be 120 to 170 pages, but as we've said in a previous video, it can be up to 400. Although it may happen. Normally, there are no changes between the PF, the provisional findings, and the final report regarding statutory questions and the gist of the case. That's why the provisional findings are so relevant. If there is a change, the CMA has to publish on its website and disclose to all the relevant parties its reasons for changing the provisional findings in order to provide the parties with an opportunity to comment prior to the publication of the final report. The provisional findings will create three main scenarios. A, the deal gets blocked. Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, and third parties will have at least 21 days to comment on the provisional findings. A notice of possible remedies will also be published because prohibition is a remedy to address a substantial lessening of competition. Once all responses have been considered, the CMA will finalize its report and announce its decision. If this happens, I think the deal will very likely be done, but expect more developments at least until the end of April. Responses from provisional findings from Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, and third parties. Final report and more. That would be if they outright block the deal. The deal gets approved without remedies. Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, and third parties will have at least 21 days to comment on the provisional findings. A notice of possible remedies won't be published in this case because there is no substantial lessening of competition. Once all responses to the provisional findings have been considered, the CMA will finalize its report and announce its decision. If this happens, I think the deal is very likely to go through, but expect more developments until the end of April. Responses to the provisional findings from third parties, final reports, and more. Then in May, June, and July, decisions from the rest of the jurisdictions, and in August, maybe the FTC trial if Microsoft hasn't closed the deal before that, because they might present the remedies to the FTC, and then the FTC agrees to those because it's already passed everywhere else, and then the deal finalizes, right? The third and final one that he lays out is the deal is anti-competitive but can be fixed through remedies. This is probably where we're going, I would imagine. Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, and third parties will have at least 21 days to comment on the provisional findings. A notice of possible remedies will also be published, where the CMA will initially propose remedies to address any competition concerns. Microsoft, Activision, and third parties will have at least 7 days, normally 14, to comment on the remedies notice. Once all responses have been considered, including a remedies working paper where the parties in the CMA will have been discussing options for remedies, the CMA will finalize its report and announce its decision, including the remedies that may have been adopted. This is the most complex and uncertain scenario because depending on the remedies proposed and the ones that Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard are willing to accept, the deal could go through or end up being abandoned. The CMA is unlikely to accept behavioral remedies, but more likely to accept structural remedies. In any case, this happens and the parties in the CMA agree on a remedy package, expect more developments until the end of April. Responses to provisional findings from third parties, Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. Responses to the remedies notice from Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, and third parties, final report, and more. Then the CMA has 12 extra weeks following publication of its final report to negotiate and finalize remedies or order them. So this would go on at least until the end of July 2023. Therefore, the provisional findings from the CMA are going to be a huge step forward for this case and will unblock lots of other review processes happening in different jurisdictions, but it won't be the end. I mean, even if it gets blocked, we're going to be here until at least the end of April. Get ready and have fun. So that's just a taste of what to expect. And just reading the possible scenarios took me like 5 minutes. So it's going to be interesting no matter what happens, and I'm going to continue covering it throughout. Now, he actually posted some really, really interesting scenarios and like how they play out. So let's read over those. And if we have time, we'll get to the questions also. But while I have you, hey, thank you so much for watching. If you're one of the people who aren't subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hitting that bell. I know half of you aren't subscribed, and it would really help me get to my goal of hitting 100,000 subscribers. Let's dive back into this though for right now. So, as we lay it out, Microsoft is expecting scenario C. Scenario C is the deal is anti-competitive and can be fixed through remedies, right? So if the CMA and the EC are indeed aligned in the case, it would make sense because we already know that the EC has concerns. So the CMA also having concerns could be logical. The $70 billion question is what kind of remedies may address those concerns? Divesting Activision, keeping Blizzard and King would be the perfect one for the CMA, but could Microsoft Activision Blizzard accept that? And he actually laid that out in more detail. So like what could happen? They could actually make them separate Activision as its own entity. So Activision, meaning Call of Duty and all those IPs, are their own thing, but Microsoft gets to keep Blizzard and King. And if they're saying that mobile is their big play, then that might work for them, but I don't know how they would feel about that, particularly because they lose Call of Duty, which is obviously one of their goals. That would be a situation where they're like, well, if we can't keep the whole package, then we abandon this. That's what he's laying out anyway. So, and here's some examples of structural remedies and what those mean. Divesting all or part of the business acquired to suitable purchaser. For example, Microsoft sells Activision Publishing to Take-Two and keeps King and Blizzard. They could carve a divestiture package out of two merging businesses, with a purchaser keeping some of both businesses and selling some of them to, for example, Take-Two buys Activision Publishing and some studios from Microsoft keeps COD, and the studios working on it sells everything else to EA and Ubisoft. So the other IPs within that deal get spun out to other people who want to purchase it. Keeping the acquired businesses and divesting the businesses already owned. For example, Microsoft sells almost all the Xbox game studios, but keeps Activision Blizzard complete. I don't know about that one. The sale of key assets. For example, Microsoft keeps Activision Blizzard complete, but sells all the studios working on COD, excluding Treyarch, Infinity Ward, and Raven. On the other hand, as far as I know, every video game acquisition so far has been approved without remedies. So I have another question. What happens if the deal passes in the EU and US, but not in the UK? You just kill the deal because a government agency from a single country says so. The merger agreement requires the approval from Europe, UK, China, and US. So one of them failing is really problematic. So I have to imagine, like, I don't like that idea of Microsoft spinning out Treyarch, Infinity Ward, and Raven. I mean, that might free up Raven to make some interesting stuff. Raven back in the day made X-Men Origins Wolverine, it was this really cool game where Wolverine would like get all messed up, but then he would heal those wounds. And it was a really cool technology at the time for an individual video game character. The game kind of falls apart later on in the gameplay, like when the Blob level and the Gambit level were sort of like weird. But a fun game nonetheless, and some cool scenes with a Sentinel. If you ever played it, shout out in the comments below. But yeah, so those are some of the things that could happen. Let's do one more of the questions, and maybe I'll make a separate video because there was like so much has happened with this case. let's just get into it. While they can do that, that may be the move. They probably would just have to divest what would be equivalent in revenue, profit, expense, or something like that. Some of the examples make more sense than others, but yes, that could potentially happen. In any case, I don't expect Microsoft selling their own studios for Activision Blizzard. I agree. I don't think that's happening. Going by Phil's statement on mobile and PC, I think A would be the most expendable. Would that Microsoft Tech Talk mean anything to the CMA toward possible remedies using divestiture? Or would their formal talks supersede anything said in the former like that? No, I don't think the Microsoft Tech Talk could be a problem. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that at one point you thought that the CMA would pass this without remedies and piggyback off the remedies that the EU would try for Microsoft. Do you think that's the way this is going to go? Yes, that's my crazy gut feeling. I mean, there are 4 scenarios with the CMA. They block the deal. Personally, I don't expect this because the legal rationale is too complex and a future appeal could get risky. But who knows? The FTC already opened that door. They accept behavioral remedies, unlikely because they are really against them and I don't think that they'll create a precedent just for this. They approve it without remedies. Legally, it makes sense. And although COD is more relevant in the UK than in Brazil or Chile, Microsoft has no economic incentive to foreclose the game. They have good pro-competitive reasons for the deal, and the ecosystem theory of harm is too speculative. They suggest structural remedies. The CMA believes that even vertical mergers should be fixed through structural remedies. And seeing that all the theories of harm are directly or indirectly linked to the importance of COD, maybe they see the divestiture of Activision Publishing, the A of the ABK, as a possible solution. So they spin off Activision to Take-Two, for example. I have to imagine Sony doesn't get that. And then what does that scenario look like? What happens with Call of Duty? That would be a very interesting question because I highly doubt Sony gets COD. And if Sony does get COD and then they make COD exclusive, a lot of people out there are going to be eating crow. Anyway, I still think that scenario 3 may happen, but if Microsoft, who has been engaging with the CMA for months, believes that an opposition with the option to offer remedies is coming, that's something to take into account. Add to that the level of alignment that the CMA would have with the EC. After all, the market's facts and theories are almost all the same. The decision should be similar too, because having very different outcomes between both could be problematic for a future appeal. It would cause issues for their legal cases down the road. Finally, all the insider services keep telling us that no one knows what the CMA is thinking. They should do a TED Talk for gaming companies about how to avoid leaks. So it's really hard to guess this one. Right now, I'm between scenarios 3 and 4, but let's see how the week progresses. And then DMU could steer rethink on behavioral remedies. Not yet, but for future acquisitions, it's still going to be relevant for sure. So that's sort of the big updates that we have from IDIS on the case. I had a few other tabs open here because there was a lot to go through this morning. That's where we sit. We're sitting on Monday morning. It's February 6th right now, and there is a potential that we hear more about it, but that is where we're sitting today. So if you like this video and you watched all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell to know when my content goes live, especially if you're one of the 50% of people who aren't subscribed and you're still watching right now. Please consider hitting that button, help me hit that goal. Thank you to the members for supporting the channel. And before I get out of here, consider checking out this video from yesterday, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now, everybody.